family.
The light is heavy.
Well, I wanted just to congratulate you about the film. I think it's a wonderful film, and it's also kind of almost self-explanatory about the process. And
Louder.
it's self-explanatory about the process of Richard Deacon's work, but I have a couple of questions. Maybe you can elaborate more on the, what drives you to do all this amazing work in all these different techniques, if it's materials, form, space, structure. I mean, what's the force behind all this process?
That's a question?
Yeah.
What's can you hear? All right? Yeah, okay, good. I suppose it's curiosity, or perversity, or not wanting to do a day job. This film has a lot of anecdotes in it, and a lot of little stories, and I think the story about the sculptures, the Buddhist sculptures in Sri Lanka is quite a kind of important one, as is the story about the snake charmer. They're both true stories, and I think the story about the sculptures, about the rock carved sculptures, the thing which I don't say in the film, but I did have said in an interview, is that actually it was also, apart from being kind of puzzled by this business of not knowing how the cliff face could have been taken away, and what sort of process there was more, was that I was also terrified. I found this so that looking I found it profoundly disturbing that that this process had taken place. So it's not being able to see the negativity or see something that wasn't there was a kind of slightly a little bit terrifying, as well as provoking kind of big curiosity. So and then the story about the tree, the snake charmer, there's a sense of wonder, and I suppose the other thing that comes out of the film is a certain tendency on my part to kind of categorize things and put them an interesting categorization or identification, and so that when talking about insects, being able to identify insects. So I think there are three elements involved. There's fear, wonder, and identification. So that those three are a kind of curiosity, and they and that's what that's I think what drives things on. I do like the world. I do like what the world, how the world is, and I am continually in awe of the fact that it's that the materials which I'm continually in awe of the fact that there's stuff, and that you can do stuff, and you can do things with that. I mean, I think that's
great. Claudia, how was the experience of filming Richard in the process of working? How was the experience of filming, and how long did it took to do this film with Richard?
It took nearly 3 years. 1 year to get the money and to get it through. It was very difficult to get people, to get the funding and the money. And it took 2 years to follow his work, because they had, for me it was important that there are 3 different kind of materials and 3 different approaches in the film, and from the beginning to the end. And so it takes time. You cannot do it in 1 month. So we met several times, and I was in London several times, and also in Cologne, and so and also in Singapore. And yeah. And what was the second?
Well, that was. I mean, I was just wondering. I mean, that the relationship, the personal relationship that you developed with the artist, because you know, given the film that you did.
I mean, I myself study art in Vienna and in Düsseldorf, and so I was an artist and I was a sculptor myself. And yeah, also in the beginning of my study, I was very interested in Richard's works, and I followed his work all these years. Yeah. And so it was a must for me to do the film. Yeah, and it took time till it worked out also in my biography. And so I was very interested in the work, and then I asked him. And it was a slowly approach also, no? Yeah. Because we also have to look how far we can go and how near, and it takes time to have yeah, the trust, and to know how far you can go or not, and what he's willing to tell me. And so it takes time to approach slowly and with responsibility, because I know that it's every artist needs space. I know it for myself.
Exactly. I just wanted was wondering about your idea of being more than a sculptor. You think yourself as a fabricator, and also about the notion of authorship and collaboration with Matthew and Gary.
Okay. The fabricator thing comes out of an interview in '83 when I said I don't, thinking about the sculpture that I make, that I don't carve and I don't model, but that I make things. And so fabricators seem to be, it's not more than a sculptor, but it seemed to be a term, that a way of describing what it is that I do. And it had a kind of artisanal kind of sense that I liked at the time. Now, but then I used to give talks about the work they were called fabrications. But of course, fabrications in English has this kind of double sense. It kind of also means the things it's not just things that are constructed, it's things that are made up. And if you describe something as a total fabrication, you mean it's kind of a bunch of lies. So that the idea of a fabricator also has this kind of slightly slippery quality to it, of someone who makes things up as well as someone who makes things. And I kind of enjoy that ambiguity. In terms of the collaboration, I mean, I think I owe kind of a huge debt to Matthew and to Gary and to the people I work with, and to and there is a sense of in Matthew's case there is a kind of an extraordinary sense of kind of partnership, and actually you can see it in the film in that scene when we're sitting talking at the back of Matthew's studio. There's what we're saying to each other isn't recorded, but actually there's a kind of great deal of close friendship, kind of close relationship evident in that film. I still think of them as my work. Yeah. But I also think that that art itself is a collaborative process, that it's not just that the artist says, does this and then puts it out, but that the audience, the critical the critics, the discussion around the work means that that the author or the artist isn't the sole person responsible, and that what you see is the kind of is a culmination of lots of individual efforts, and there is I mean, there's a sense in which I myself am a fabrication, I suppose. I suppose that's what's that's a part of what I've come to believe or come to think.
Great. I guess the same thing would apply to Claudia, because cinematography is actually excellent in the film too. So there's also a process of collaboration with with your team in the film, no? Is that something that you also?
For me, it was very important to show the people, the audience, to take away the romanticism of an artist.
Yeah.
The most people think art just is made from one person and he's a hero. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's this totally a wrong idea of an artist. The art market is so different. I mean, one person can't do all this work. I mean, realize all this work. It's impossible, and it's always that they have assistants, they have people who put their energy inside and also their ideas inside. It's normal and it's a reality, and I wanted to show how really art works, and what is the motivation of an artist to do it, and what is creativity, what is art itself. And I didn't want to make. I want to stop this romanticism and this prefix idea of an artist.
And just to keep it simple, I mean, how do you see yourself in relation to the generation of sculptors that emerged when you were young in the the 70s in London, like Cragg and Anthony Gormley and.
I was at the Royal College with Tony Cragg. He was in the sculpture department. I was in a department called Environmental Media, which was not because when I went to the Royal College, I came out of doing performance work to go to the Royal College. I didn't come out of I'd come out of object making. Although by the time I got to the Royal College, I'd kind of decided that that I wanted to make object. I got a bit tired of being in the frame as a kind of individual. But Tony was at the Royal College. I was at St. Martin's with Bill Woodrow,
yeah.
and those two have been very close friends. Anthony Gormley and Anish I met at the beginning of the 80s through exhibition making. Alison Wilding at the same time, and I've kept in touch with most of them, and there's it's a small community of the people that make things. There's a small community of sculptors, and actually, and I think we all. It was a help to all of us that somehow there was a group. At the time, at the beginning of the 80s, the situation changed. It changed in painting, and it changed in sculpture, and there was a kind of move away from conceptualism and from the certain of the rigors of 1970s art production, which is now much more interesting again. But in the 80s, there was this kind of move away from that rather kind of austere. Austere method of from that rather austere conceptualism. Mm-hmm. Though many of those artists were also people that I knew and were became friends, and the I think that the group of artists, if I look at it, try and look at it sort of from a kind of distant perspective, I think the group of artists in England, in the UK, the group of sculptors, we profited a bit from the way in which the new spirit in painting wanted to try and look at other things. It was only in the UK that a group of sculptors emerged, and then, or it seemed like that. Though in fact, the same is true in Germany with Schutter and Klingenholler and Reinhard Mucha. So that, and there was this funny sense at the time also of nationalisms in art production, so that the critics were kind of looking for new things, and there was this group of artists who had kind of gone back to object making, and weren't using those strategies of documentation, photography, text, etc., but kind of had gone back into the studio. There are always predecessors, and there were predecessors within, like Bruce Nauman, for example, is an artist who's always retained a kind of affection for the studio, and centered his production around ideas about the studio. The thing that, so we were kind of thrown together as a group somehow. There's some kind of shared interests, some not so shared, and some not so shared. But as it was useful, or kind of, I think if there's a whole group of people, you can somehow get promoted or looked at, yeah, without there having to be any choice made about who was better than the other, and that benefits them all. Then, I mean, you could see the same thing happening in the 90s with the group that was known as the YBA, the Young British Artists. Yeah. That a whole group gets looked at, and then everyone gets kind of opportunities, and then somehow slightly later on paths diverge.
Great. And I don't know if you're aware that there's a big major retrospective, a survey show of Richard Deacon at the Tate Modern in London. Tate Britain, sorry.
Not Tate Modern.
Sorry, Tate Britain. And it's going to be up until end of April 27th. And there's going to be also a very good catalog coming out. And I think, I mean, I think it's a great survey show of your work for the past 40 years, no?
It's a survey. Yeah, it's a survey of work from the past 4 years. Actually, on this film, you see me doing a not dissimilar show, setting up the show in Strasbourg. Except that's all in one room, and the show at Tate Britain is a series of 6 rooms, and there are differences. When it's one room, then you see everything together, and you see everything connected to each other. Whereas in a sequence of rooms, then you start to see a story, and obviously a linear progression has some differences, and for artists doing a linear show, a progression of rooms is well, if you tell a story, then you've got to kind of end up with kind of what's next, or you have to finish it. Actually, the other problem with stories is they finish. They got endings. So that's, as an artist, that's a difficulty, that you do a retrospective, it has an ending. The way we avoided that in terms of the structure of the show is that we've put the big green ceramic work that you see in the film there between the entrance and the exit to the exhibition, so that it's no longer a line, but somehow it becomes a circle, and that means that you go back to the beginning again, which is also, in a funny way, true about the work. That I'm surprised that the work I do now has connections to work that I did in has connection to work I did in the end of the 70s, in ways that I wouldn't have anticipated.
Great. I think we'll keep it there.
Okay. There are other things that come up in relationship to doing a film. The one is that I have this terrible habit of blowing my cheeks out, which is completely unconscious, and I get so embarrassed when I see myself sitting there looking like a hamster when I'm thinking. And the other is how many times I have a cut head, which is obviously a hazard of losing your hair, but it kind of becomes, when you see it on the film, you think, God almighty, I look like I've been out on the kind of... Anyway,
no, thank you. It's a very personal film. It's a great film, and congratulations to both. And it's a great pleasure to have you both here in Toronto.
Thank you.
Thank you.